This is an AI avatar of Lesix founder Rob Lee. Script produced using a custom-trained AI employee in Claude. Video produced using HeyGen. Now let's begin. You know what I've noticed? Real estate agents often become inadvertent community leaders. Think about it. You're the person people call when they're making one of the biggest decisions of their lives. You're in neighborhoods every single day. You see the patterns, the changes, the opportunities. But here's what's interesting. While many agents focus on individual transactions, the most successful ones understand something deeper. They understand that their long-term success is directly tied to the health and unity of the communities they serve. Today we're going to explore a question that I think is fundamental to modern real estate practice. How do you unite diverse community segments, not just to make more sales, but to build something sustainable, something that lifts everyone up? In the next 15 minutes, you'll learn 5 key strategies for inclusive community building. You'll see real-world examples from agents and organizations who've done this successfully, and you'll walk away with practical steps you can implement immediately. Let's start with something that sounds obvious, but most agents skip entirely. You need to truly understand who lives in your market area. Now, I'm not talking about just looking at census data, although that's a start. I'm talking about understanding the cultural fabric of your community, the different ethnic groups, the economic segments, the generational differences, the invisible boundaries that exist. Here's what I mean. In many communities, you might have long-time residents who've been there for decades. Then you have newer arrivals, maybe young professionals or immigrant families. Each group has different needs, different communication styles, different concerns about real estate. The mistake most agents make? They market to everyone the same way. They use the same message, the same channels, the same approach. But think about this from a cultural perspective. What resonates with a first-generation immigrant family might be completely different from what resonates with empty nesters who've lived in the same neighborhood for 30 years. So how do you map this out? Start by partnering with local cultural organizations, religious institutions, community centers. Don't go in trying to sell anything. Go in trying to learn. Ask questions like, what are the biggest housing concerns in your community? How do people prefer to receive information? What barriers do they face in real estate transactions? This isn't just about being politically correct. It's about being effective. When you understand the cultural landscape, you can communicate in ways that actually connect. Now, understanding demographics is just the foundation. The real work happens when you start building relationships. And I want to emphasize the word authentic here. You know what doesn't work? Showing up at a community event once, taking some photos for social media, and calling it community engagement. People can sense when you're performing versus when you're genuinely invested. Authentic relationship building requires what I call consistent presence without agenda. What does that mean? It means showing up repeatedly, not because you need something, but because you're genuinely interested in the community's well-being. Here's a practical example. Let's say you're working in a diverse neighborhood with a significant Latino population. Instead of just putting up Spanish language yard signs, you might start attending community meetings. You might volunteer at local events. You might partner with established community leaders who already have trust and credibility. But here's the key insight. You're not trying to become the spokesperson for that community. You're trying to become a trusted resource within that community. There's a big difference. This also means being willing to have uncomfortable conversations about housing discrimination, about gentrification, about economic displacement. These are real concerns in diverse communities, and if you can't acknowledge them honestly, you can't build authentic relationships. The agents who do this well, they become known not just as someone who sells houses, but as someone who cares about the community's long-term success. Let's talk about how you actually communicate with diverse community segments, because this is where many well-intentioned agents still miss the mark. Inclusive marketing isn't just about translating your materials into different languages, although that's certainly part of it. It's about understanding that different cultural groups have different decision-making processes, different information needs, different trusted sources. For example, in some cultures, extended family plays a major role in real estate decisions. Your marketing might need to acknowledge and include multiple generations. In other communities, religious or community leaders have significant influence. You might need to build relationships with those influencers. Here's something specific you can implement. Instead of using stock photos of generic families in your marketing, use images that reflect the actual diversity of your community. Feature different ethnicities, different family structures, different age ranges. But go deeper than just visuals. Consider your communication channels. Some communities primarily get information through social media, others through community bulletin boards or local newspapers, others through word-of-mouth networks. You also want to be mindful of cultural values in your messaging. Some cultures prioritize community and family stability. Others emphasize individual achievement and investment opportunity. Your value proposition should acknowledge these different motivations. The goal isn't to stereotype, but to recognize that one size doesn't fit all. And when you take the time to customize your approach, you demonstrate respect for each community's unique characteristics. Now we get to one of the most powerful strategies for uniting diverse segments, creating shared experiences that bring different groups together around common interests. Think about it this way. Different communities might have different backgrounds, different languages, different traditions, but they often share similar concerns. They want safe neighborhoods, good schools, strong property values, access to amenities. So how do you create events that celebrate diversity while addressing these common concerns? Here are some examples that work. Home buyer education workshops, but designed to be culturally inclusive. Maybe you bring in speakers from different cultural backgrounds. Maybe you provide materials in multiple languages. Maybe you serve food that reflects the community's diversity, or consider organizing neighborhood improvement projects, community gardens, cleanup days, safety walks. These activities bring people together around shared goals, while allowing different cultural groups to contribute their unique strengths. Here's what's interesting about shared experiences. They break down the invisible barriers between different community segments. When people work together on something they all care about, cultural differences become sources of strength rather than division. And as the real estate agent who facilitated these connections, you become known as someone who brings people together. That's incredibly valuable for long-term business development. Let's be honest about something. Inclusive community building isn't always easy. You're going to encounter challenges, and if you're not prepared for them, they can derail your efforts. Challenge number one is language barriers. But this goes beyond just translation. It's about understanding cultural communication styles. Some cultures are very direct, others are more indirect. Some value individual recognition, others prefer group acknowledgement. Challenge number two is economic disparities. You might be working in a community where some residents are first-time home buyers stretching to afford anything, while others are looking at luxury properties. How do you serve both without alienating either? The key is to position yourself as a resource for the entire community, not just the highest value transactions. Maybe you partner with down payment assistance programs. Maybe you become an expert on affordable housing options. Maybe you create educational content that serves different economic levels. Challenge number 3 is dealing with resistance from established groups. Sometimes, longtime residents worry that demographic changes threaten their community's character. How do you address these concerns without dismissing them? I think the answer lies in focusing on shared values rather than demographic differences. Most people want the same basic things. They want their neighborhood to be safe, to have strong schools, to maintain property values. When you frame community building around these shared goals, resistance often decreases. Let me share a powerful example of how these principles work in practice. In Oakland, California, there's a historic street called 7th Street. For decades, it was known as the Harlem of the West, a thriving hub for Black businesses and culture. But by 2016, the area faced a serious challenge. 9 major real estate projects were planned for the corridor. Longtime residents and business owners worried about displacement and losing their community's cultural identity. Here's what's fascinating about how they responded. Instead of fighting development, community leaders decided to take control of it. They formed something called Ellisk Bay Area, which stands for Local Initiatives Support Corporation. Their strategy was brilliant in its simplicity. They started purchasing key community assets, like Esther's Orbit Room, a jazz club that had been the heart of the community for 60 years. Instead of letting it be bought by outside developers, they bought it themselves. But they didn't stop there. They organized what they called Black Economics Salons. These were community meetings where residents could discuss their vision for the neighborhood's future, not just react to outside proposals, but proactively shape development. The results? They've been able to attract investment and development while preserving the community's cultural character. Local businesses are thriving. Property values are increasing, but longtime residents aren't being displaced. What can real estate agents learn from this? Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is help communities take control of their own development process. Here's another example. This one from a major real estate brand, Better Homes and Gardens. Real estate recognized something important. Their agent base wasn't reflecting the diversity of the communities they served. So they launched a comprehensive diversity and inclusion initiative. But here's what made it different from typical corporate programs. They focused on practical strategies that individual agents could implement immediately. They provided training on cultural competency, fair housing compliance, understanding different communities' specific needs. But more importantly, they helped agents develop authentic relationships with underrepresented communities. The results were measurable. Agents who participated in the program reported increased referrals, expanded client bases, stronger community relationships. They were able to connect with home buyers who had previously felt excluded from the real estate process. Here's the key insight for individual agents. You don't need a corporate program to implement these strategies. You can start building cultural competency and inclusive practices on your own. The agents who succeeded in this program, they became known as trusted resources within diverse communities. Not because they were trying to check diversity boxes, but because they genuinely invested in understanding and serving different cultural groups. Let me share one more example, this one from a 5-year research project by the Brookings Institution. They worked with 11 diverse neighborhoods across 6 different states. Their goal was to see how community coalitions could unite different segments around economic development. What they discovered was fascinating. The most successful communities were the ones that brought together diverse stakeholders from the beginning. Community organizations, local government, private sector partners, resident leaders. One stakeholder said something that really struck me. Quote, "I take it as a very large victory that the majority of applicants had never received capital before. We were successful in reaching the most marginalized business owners. It was not easy. There's a lot of mistrust. We had to do on-the-ground canvassing and work with partners to gain that trust." That last part is crucial. We had to work with partners to gain that trust. They didn't try to do it alone. They recognized that trust is built through relationships, and relationships take time. For real estate agents, this suggests a different approach to community building. Instead of trying to be the central figure, become the connector. Help different community groups find common ground. Facilitate partnerships between organizations that serve different cultural segments. When you position yourself as someone who brings people together, rather than someone who's trying to sell to everyone, your influence actually increases. Let's bring this all together. We've covered 5 key strategies for uniting diverse community segments. Let me summarize the most important points. First, truly understand your community's cultural landscape. Don't make assumptions. Do the research. Talk to community leaders. Learn about different group-specific needs and communication preferences. Second, build authentic relationships through consistent presence without agenda. Show up repeatedly. Invest in the community's well-being. Don't just appear when you need something. Third, develop inclusive marketing and communication strategies. Customize your approach for different cultural segments. Use appropriate channels and messaging for each group. Fourth, create shared experiences that bring different segments together around common interests. Focus on what unites people rather than what divides them. And fifth, be prepared for challenges, language barriers, economic disparities, resistance from established groups. Address these proactively with empathy and practical solutions. The case studies we looked at, they all demonstrate the same principle. When you help communities unite around shared goals, everyone benefits. Property values increase, businesses thrive, social cohesion improves, and yes, real estate agents build more successful practices. But here's what I want you to remember most. This isn't just about growing your business, although that's certainly a benefit. This is about recognizing that as a real estate professional, you have the opportunity to strengthen the communities you serve. So here's what I want you to do. Pick one strategy we discussed today, just one. Maybe it's researching the cultural organizations in your market area. Maybe it's attending a community meeting you've never been to before. Maybe it's partnering with a local group on a shared project. Start small. Be genuine. Focus on building relationships rather than generating immediate business. Trust me, when you approach community building with authenticity and patience, the business results follow naturally. And remember, the most successful agents aren't just transaction facilitators. They're community builders. They're the people who help diverse groups find common ground and work together toward shared goals. The communities that thrive in the coming decades will be the ones that successfully unite their diverse segments around common purposes. As a real estate professional, you have the opportunity to play a crucial role in that process. Start today. Your community and your business will be stronger for it.